Chad Williams, welcome to the show, man. It's an honor.
Thank you so much for having me on, Mark.
You bet, man. Well, before we dive in, which I cannot wait to do, let's hear about your dad life. What do you got going on at home?
So I've got two children. One son, he's 5 years old, by the name of Noah, the biblical character there, and my daughter Ella. She's 8 years old. So it's definitely a fun age. I get told by guys that have kids that are growing up, like these are some of the best years, and so I'm trying to soak it in and absorb it as much as I can.
Yeah, that is some of the most. Those are the most fun years. Not the most fun, but I look upon those years with my kids just with great memories, and that's the time span where you're their hero and you can do no wrong, right?
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I always think that whatever's next, like has better things to come. I remember in high school, they're like telling us these are going to be the best 4 years of your life. And I was like thinking, I hope not, you know?
Yeah, yeah. The best 4 years up until that point, anyway.
Right.
Oh, well, man, I can't have a SEAL on the show without at least touching on some of your military exploits. So, as much as you're comfortable and able to share, kind of talk about how you got into the military and some of the things that you did while you're in the SEALs.
Sure. So just a little background on the SEALs for anyone listening that maybe, might not be so familiar. SEAL is an acronym and it stands for our areas of operation. So we operate in the sea, the air, and the land. To kind of give folks an idea of what my team was doing on the last deployment I was involved in. We're out in Iraq and given the task of hunting down men that make suicide vests and roadside bombs like IEDs. And while we're out there, we're working with a group called the ISOF, which is the Iraqi Special Operations Forces. And one of our goals with those guys is to simply teach them how to fight their own fights. And so the best way to do that is to not only train them on base, but actually go outside the wire and fight side by side with them. And I remember when we were running out of time, we only had maybe enough time on the calendar to do maybe one more operation with these guys. We weren't so sure if they're ready for us to pass that baton off to them. So we decided, hey, for this final op, why don't we make it a sort of graduation operation? We'll let them plan the whole thing from the ground up and we'll be there with them just in case things hit the fan. And so they start from scratch. They get some intel. They find this guy that's an Iraqi policeman by day. So he's wearing the police uniform by day, but at night back home, he's one of these bomb makers that we're looking for. So they came up with this whole plan and approach, how they want to get in, grab this guy, extract. I remember rolling out, got my night vision goggles on, looking through my green little world, 50 caliber machine gun in front of me. And I'm just thinking about all the things I know. I know that, we're going to get in and get this guy, where he lives, how we're going to do it, how we're going to get out. But one unique thing I know about this op that makes it different than every other operation, I knew this is it, man. This is the final operation, which also meant I know just a matter of days from now, I'm going to be back in my hometown, Huntington Beach, California, surfing in the ocean. But what none of us really knew about that night was that night we were all being set up on an ambush. And we're about to find ourselves engaging, in this gun battle for our lives. And it truly was the team's ability to shoot, move, and communicate and perform some of the leadership skills that are instilled in us and that are in the SEAL Creed that ultimately led to the obvious conclusion and possibility of me, being on the program here today and making it out of that alive. And so maybe we can touch on that in a little bit on the podcast. But that kind of gives folks an idea of what SEALs are doing in the teams overseas. And then with my dad, he's like the ultimate encourager, mentor, very wise, very smart man. And when I told him that I wanted to be a SEAL, at that time I was making a lot of like sort of rash decisions in my life. I was doing things and starting them, becoming obsessed with them, and then kind of wearing it out and being done with it. I was sponsored by Vans shoes, skateboarding, doing some competing, got burned out, stopped. I started working on sport fishing boats, really got into the whole fishing thing, thought maybe I want to be a captain of a boat, one day, kind of got burned out, stopped. Same thing with like, baseball, made it like the all-star teams, just got burned out, stopped. So now I'm attending a local community college after high school, and I'm not doing any of those things anymore. I'm doing nothing. And so I felt like a nothing, like I felt like a zero.
Sure.
And so I'm like, man, how do I turn this around? I don't want to be a nobody. I don't want to live an insignificant, wasted life. And so as I'm sitting in that school parking lot, I think, man, I know I'm going to do to turn this whole thing around. I want to go join the military. And not just that, I want to be a Navy SEAL. And so I was so all in on that, that I'm supposed to take finals that day as I'm sitting there in that school parking lot. And I'm like, if I'm going to be a frogman, my first order of business is this: I do not need to go to school anymore. So I took off out of that school parking lot, and I let my dad know the bad news and good news as I presented it. And so, Sharon, the bad news, I'm not passing any of my classes, but the good news, Dad, it's all right. I got a plan. I'm the man with the plan. I'm going to be a Navy SEAL. And he's just looking at me, looking back now. Boy, was he being the voice of reason. He's like saying, son, just so you know, joining the military is not like any of these other things you've ever done in the past, like playing ball, skateboarding, or going to a local community college. He says, if you find out, that maybe being a SEAL isn't for you, or suppose you quit and don't make it through SEAL training, just to be clear, you will still be in the military, and you're probably going to pick up a job like chip and paint off some boat in Japan. And, there's some truth to that. So that was to me, that was like the best motivational speech right there, because I'm like, I will not be that man. And I started preparing, right away, doing all the pull-ups and push-ups and sit-ups and running and swimming. I was very determined. I had that mindset about it. Like, I was already determined I will die before I ever ring that bell and quit in SEAL training.
Man, so how old are you at this point? Like 19-ish?
Yeah, 18, turning 19, kind of, yeah, definitely the teen years there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I didn't even finish that first year over at junior college yet. And what happens is he invites me into his room one day, and I'm thinking he gets it now. He sees I'm serious. He goes, you really want to do this, huh? You want to be a SEAL? I'm like, yeah, Dad, I want to be a SEAL. He goes, great. Well, I set up a workout for you with the Navy SEAL. Check out my computer screen. And I'll never forget looking at the computer. And I'm thinking, my dad is a known Navy SEAL, so what could this be? He doesn't understand how the internet works, how people could lie. They could be whoever they want to be on the web. And it just says in the email, can Chad come out and play tomorrow? And I'm reading that like, play? Like, Dad, let me get this straight. You met some guy off the internet, says he wants to play with me, and you're arranging this whole thing right now? And he goes, no, he's a SEAL, son. I'm like, all right, I'll go meet up with the guy. Well, what I didn't know is there was a conversation that took place prior to that email, and it was on the phone. And my dad was on the phone with him, this SEAL, and he's telling him, look, my son wants to be a SEAL, but he has no idea what he's signing up for. Like, he doesn't know what he's getting involved in. And so he was asking him for a big favor. He's like, could you do me a solid? Would you be willing to meet up with my son? But what I'm asking you to do, man, I need you to crush him. Like, just bury him, like beat this desire of becoming a SEAL out of him. And so he didn't get the response on the phone. It happened after a little bit of thought in that email. And so I found out about that months later, but it's good for folks maybe to kind of know the backstory up front. That's what the can Chad come out and play tomorrow thing was. And so that's where I got introduced to the Navy SEAL, Scott Helvenston.
Wow. Not many people can say they had a workout with the Navy SEAL before becoming a SEAL. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, the thing with Scott too is that obviously I don't know that this is going to be kind of like a test fire. He's going to see if I got what it takes. I find myself going for a run with him out of the wetlands, and I did do something to upset him, at some point, because he went a little over the top, and I'm running ahead of him and he's behind me, and I'm trying to take off. I'm trying to press him, and he's catching right up to where I am, and next thing you know, I'm going down on the ground, and I got the wind knocked out of me. He's jumping on top of me and just ragdolling me, screaming in my face. I'm thinking, guy off the internet, like, oh no, this is happening, child predator. And then these words come out. He says, you want to be a Navy SEAL, you better stay 3 paces behind me. And something about that moment, it clicked right there. I knew, like, this is it. This is for real. Like, if I want to be a Navy SEAL, this is the moment, like it or not, where if I quit right now, this is going to affect the trajectory of the rest of my life. Like, the way I respond in this moment is going to set the tone. And so that's where I just reaffirmed that initial attitude that I had in the parking lot, like, die before you quit. And so he gets up to 3 paces and he winds up taking me on this run where I have never ran like that, even after going through SEAL training. I stayed on his heels, but I was like, that was by far the most difficult singular workout I have ever been through. And we finally get to a point where he's kind of pacing back and forth, looking at me, and I'm thinking, what's the deal with this guy, you know? And he just says, "Hey, if we would have got another mile or two, would you have stayed with me?" And I just told him, "Scott, I'll die before I quit." And he gets this big smile on his face. He just goes, "You want to meet up again for another workout tomorrow?" And I agreed. And I didn't know if it was going to be that every time. And thankfully it wasn't. It was no longer these like a beat down like that. It was more of a building up. And I moved on in life from initially from the start. He used to call me Bubba. It was just Bubba all the time. And eventually kind of took me under his wing and started calling me Junior. But
It's cool.
I think maybe one of the takeaways we could touch on, right, would be, and you can call this a leadership principle or, a truth to live by is, people kind of have this idea of Navy SEALs as being these super elite, extraordinary, men. And you picture the people that become SEALs, you're probably picturing, some guy that's just cut from another piece of cloth, something different. And it couldn't be further from the case. SEAL training is a melting pot. We have all kinds of guys show up from different backgrounds. And part of our SEAL creed, and this would be the truth, I think, to share with everyone, it says that we're the common man with uncommon desire to succeed.
Mm.
I did see that they recently tried to change that to common citizens with uncommon desire to succeed.
Yeah,
Something
I saw
weird
that
going
too.
on there. Yeah, but thankfully, I think Trump overturned it. But yeah, you could say it applies to women in a sense. Be common man or common woman with uncommon desire to succeed. This is whole life stuff. And so the idea behind that is it's not the extraordinary people that go and accomplish extraordinary things. It's the common people, but what do they have about them that makes them different? It's not
Mm.
DNA. It's a desire. It's a
Right.
mindset. Like, how bad do you want it? And I could demonstrate this no clearer than the first day of SEAL training, showing up 173 guys total, instructors coming into the room saying, "Gentlemen, how many of you are willing to die before you quit?" We're all pounding our chest. We go, "Hoo-yah, that's our yes." And I remember this instructor goes, "Great, why don't you take a mental picture of the guys on your left and right? And in fact, do the same thing if you got guys in front of you and behind you." So I'm looking around the room at, all these other guys. And he goes, "Chances are, if you're still standing here for graduation day, these guys that you just took a mental picture of on your left and right, in front of you, behind you, chances are they didn't make it if you were still there for graduation." And that's where it was an eye opener for me. I was like, wow, where are these quitters going to come from? Because I knew it wasn't going to be me, but at the same time, these guys say it's not going to be them, and they say it the same way I say it. And we've already gone through some pre-SEAL training together. This is, like in doc, we went through some beat downs with the instructors, and we suffered pretty good. And there was no quitting any of these guys. So I'm just thinking, how deep do we got to go? Like, what is it
Yeah.
going to take? And so realizing the majority of the room has got to go, I'm just trying to pick off guys that are the low hanging fruit. Like, where are some of the early guys there to go? I'm looking around the room and I see this guy, Barth. And Barth, he was not one of the guys that was going to go. Barth was the stud of the class. This was the guy it just seemed he was born and bred to be a Navy SEAL. He was cut from another piece of cloth. There was never a question over who's going to get first place, like on a run, swim, whatever we did. He was in such a league of his own that the conversation was, who's grabbing second? Who's getting second place today? Because we already know Barth is just in his own pack. So I'm thinking, all right, there's one of the guys that's going to be there for graduation day. And I'm kind of like telling myself, like, come on, man, you got to find people that you think will quit, not people that'll make it. I'm scanning the room a little bit more, and I see this guy, Alex Gagne. Now, Alex Gagne was the complete antithesis of Barth. Like, not only is this guy going to quit, he is the ugly duckling of the class. He's the locker room talk. He's going to be the first guy to quit. How can I forget about that guy? And so I'm like, all right, at least I got that settled. I found the first guy that'll probably quit. Well, the irony is that by the time we get to the most difficult part of training, Hell Week, who's amongst the first to quit? Well, I saw this guy, Alex Gagne. Amongst the first to quit was Barth, the stud of the class, the guy that everybody thought was born and bred to be a Navy SEAL. And the crazy thing, who ultimately made it through the pipeline and became a Navy SEAL? Alex Gagne, the guy that everybody thought, not only will he quit, he'll be the first guy to quit. And so what I want to emphasize there is the truth of this principle, that you can be a common man. The key, though, to success is uncommon desire to succeed.
Yeah.
And that's good news, especially in this day and age where A lot of people try and base things off of, you know, privilege or race or like some type of identity thing, or they are the victim of their upbringing and circumstances. And it's like that's not the difference maker right there. Like, sure, I'll grant it, yeah, maybe some people do grow up in better households or do get better educations, but that's not the stuff that really counts. The stuff that really counts, you can't control. A lot those are uncontrollable factors, but the stuff that really matters are the controllable factors. Like, you cannot determine your DNA. Some people just have the DNA that produces the muscle and the stamina, but the thing that matters the most is not your DNA does not determine destiny. It's desire, it's
Yeah.
mindset, it's heart. And so whatever it is that you're going after, you have to have that mindset, that heart, the desire for it. And those are the types of people that God uses, by the way.
Yeah.
In fact, look throughout the scriptures. You'd be pretty hard pressed to find, someone that had, his natural ability used by the Lord in an incredible way.
Yeah.
He uses a lot of flawed human beings. You
100%.
know, Moses was on the run. He was a fugitive at 40 years in the wilderness, kicking rocks, following around sheep, and that's when God calls him. And he's asking God, who am I? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, that I
Yeah.
should tell him to let the people go? He's
Yeah.
asking the wrong question. It's not who am I, it's who is my God. And so if your heart is aligned correctly, and he got around to asking that question, he got a name out of God that no one had ever gotten before, the great Ego Ami, the great I am. But God says, like, I will be with you. And so it's the little runts of the little, like God says in 1 Samuel 16:7, he says, for I do not see as man sees. For man, what does he do? He looks at the outward appearance. That's what we all do. We look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And he's contrasting like Saul, King Saul, and little runt of the litter, David. David was literally not even consideration to be picked, right? To be king of Israel. He was the runt of the pack. This little guy, what did he do? Well, we know him for taking on the giant Goliath. And what's unique about David? Well, he was described as a man after God's own heart. And so he had a loyal heart towards the Lord, and the Lord is able to use him in an extraordinary way. 2 Chronicles 16:9, the eyes of the Lord go to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong on behalf of those whose hearts are loyal to him. That's the key right there. It's your heart, your desire, your mindset.
Man, that's good stuff. That is so good. Okay. So I know a lot of guys who have desire. Like, I have a desire to do a lot of different things. What, through your experience, and we'll maybe then relay it back to fatherhood, takes that desire and brings it into action? Can I go out on a limb and answer my own question real quick?
Please.
If I were to answer that question, I would say it's discipline.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts?
I think it's the combination of the two. I think that if you have the right fuel, the fuel, I would say, is kind of like that desire, but then, there's the actual practical steps that you take.
Right.
Right.
And
And so
that's
it's
kind of
kind of
what
like
I
what,
like, the discipline to follow through on those steps.
right. And I felt like the hardest thing for me was figuring out what I wanted to do. And everything else after that was a matter of practical steps. Like when I was kind of in the ether, not knowing what I'm going to do with my life, that was a horrible feeling. I didn't like being in that place. But once I captured something in my crosshairs, that's what I want to do. I want to go be a Navy SEAL. Then I got like the big macro long-term goal or plan. And then I just got to figure out all the practical steps between, where I'm at and how to get there. And like you said, it is discipline. It is constantly just showing up. If you had to, write a book overnight, that would be a pretty overwhelming and daunting task, like a 300-page book. But what if you just wrote one page every day?
Yeah.
That's how it was relayed to me. Like my mentor, Ray Comfort, he was always pressing me to write a book. I'm like, I don't want to write a book. Reading a book is one thing. I don't want to write a book, man. Maybe one day, I'm way older. And he goes, look, I'm not trying to overwhelm you. He says, but a book is about 70,000 words. And I'm like, well, that's exactly why I don't want to write 70,000 words. He goes, wait. He goes, but if you just wrote like 500 words a day, you'd be there after 140 days.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, when you break it down like that, yeah, that makes
That's
a lot of
doable.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's that whole, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, well, having that long-term, goal, the more specific you could get about it, the better shot you have of actually hitting it. Like
Yeah.
there's a fundamental in shooting. We call it aim small, miss small.
Yeah.
And the idea behind that isn't small thinking. The idea behind that is like the more particular I could get about whatever it is that's in my crosshairs, the better shot I have of hitting it. If I'm just trying to hit an enemy insurgent that's like flanking my team, and the goal is hit him somewhere, and I miss, what happens? Well, I'm off target. I don't touch him at all. But if I say, you know what? I'm going to aim small. Well, if I aim small, my miss will be small as well. My goal isn't just, my goal is to hit him, but where's my aim? I'm finding the third button down on his t-shirt. I'm very particular now. And if I've got that third button down, I'm aiming small. Maybe I miss. Maybe I don't hit that button, but the miss will be small. I'll still find myself somewhere on him.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the whole idea about, this whole goal setting is the more particular you can get, zeroing in on what it is that you want to do, the better shot you have of actually, hitting it. And then it is the discipline, like you say, of just slowly pulling the trigger, squeeze one off into the target you're going for.
Yeah, man. And that can apply to so many things just in everyday life, right? You throw a goal out there. It's like you said, I want to write a book. Well, just that, leaving that as a goal, that's unattainable. But when you break it down into like, okay, 500 words a day, I can do
Right.
that.
And so we start from the broader general, like when I look back, I didn't want to live a wasted life. So I want to do something big, something great. All right, well, that's pretty broad, And
Yeah.
I started zeroing in like, oh, maybe I could join the military. And then I started thinking about the branches of the military. Like, okay, I want to join the Navy and I want to be a part of like their elite. I want to be a part of like the Navy SEALs. And so that's kind of like where I really zeroed in. And so my aim was very small there.
That's good stuff, man. Yeah. I think we could probably turn a whole podcast or a whole new episode into just like this one point because
Yeah.
it's rich. It's rich. And I feel like we've sort of unofficially segued into some of your leadership takeaways here. So goal setting, I know, is one. Rattle off a few more for us.
Sure. So, I mean, that's where it starts, right? The goal, you have your what, but then I would say like, what's the why? Like, why do you want to do it? Right. And
Yeah.
everyone's why could be completely different. Like my why might be the thing that really does get me up in the morning. And like, I'm willing to die before I quit for that why. And someone else might think like, that's totally ridiculous. That's like a stupid why, right there. But the thing is you have to have a good why. Right. And so that's why I'm saying you got to be this common man with uncommon desire, for that thing. But then it is the practical steps. And the best thing that happened to me was getting a mentor, somebody that had already been down the path that I was trying to go down. He was taking me through the discipline and the practical steps, the pull-ups, push-ups, and sit-ups, and the running and swimming. And he was like, he showed me what it meant to be a servant leader. And we hear that term get thrown around sometimes, especially like out in the corporate world.
Yeah.
But like, what is servant leadership? It's something we practice in the SEAL teams as part of our SEAL creed. And so servant leadership, I think the best way to really understand it is to first contrast it with its opposite. So the opposite of a servant leader would be that prideful, arrogant leader that doesn't really care about the team so much, but they are in a position of power.
Yeah.
And so they could call out the shots. They could tell people what to do, and people listen to them only because they have to listen to them.
Right. Do it because I told you.
Right. Or else maybe I get fired,
Right.
or maybe I get written up. Maybe I don't collect my paycheck at the end of the day. And
Right.
so some people do rule with an iron fist like that. It's a form of leadership. I think it's kind of a default position. There's probably more of these out there than the opposite, the servant leader. And so it all backfires on a person like that in the end. And you can see that versus the servant leader. So the servant leader being the opposite of that is, well, the best example of a servant leader is go back 2,000 years ago. And whether you love him or hate him, there is one thing you cannot deny about Jesus of Nazareth. He knew how to lead people.
Yeah.
And he was very well known for saying, I did not come to be served, but to serve.
Yep.
And most people that are even biblically illiterate, they know the story of how at one point he got down on his hands and knees and he washed his disciples' feet. And what that did right there, as he's investing into them, is it blew their minds so much. Like, here he is, our leader, doing this for us when we should be doing these types of things for him, that something came out of that that money can't buy. And it's
Yep.
something that every leader wants. It's loyalty.
Yep.
So that when he gave them a task, like, here's what I want you to do, boys. I want you to go out and spread this message, throughout the whole a world that hates you. And ultimately, the majority of these guys were killed in the process. They weren't just willing to do it to collect a paycheck at the end of the day. These guys were willing to literally do it and put their lives on the line in the process. And so when you don't have that loyalty, all you're going to get out of people that follow you is the bare minimum. They're only going to give you just enough to keep their job, just enough to collect that paycheck at the end of the day. So it really backfires because maybe you are that CEO, that manager, or the father of your household. You capture the vision, right? You have your aim small, miss small. You're like, oh, I know the direction that we need to go. Well, who do you need in order to see that thing through? Well, you're going to need all the people around you. But the thing is, if you're that prideful, arrogant leader, you might have a brilliant target in mind, but you got a bunch of people that are only going to give you the bare minimum. And so your target will always be like an eagle with its wings clipped. It just never soared quite as high as it could have.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're this servant leader, which Scott was in my life, and which I learned about, like, in the teams, once we got into the teams, like, the expectation is it's your team first, then your buddy, then you. Like, the me always comes last. When I'm going through a door in close quarters combat, I'm not looking over my own back, even though there might be an enemy to the right of me. And I'm going in to the left of the corner. I'm not covering my own back. My buddy's covering my back, and I'm covering his back. And when we're covering down for each other like that, it creates this environment of unity and loyalty.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly what we want in the SEAL teams. People want to know, like, what's the secret, to the SEAL teams and that team dynamic. I would say it's that sense of loyalty for the guys on your left, on your right, especially when you're overseas. It's esteeming the needs of others as greater than your own. And when you actually are practicing that and everyone else is practicing that, that's quite a glue that bonds everybody together.
Yeah, 100%. And I suppose, me speaking, I've never been in the military, so I'm speculating, but I mean, to me, that seems like it would almost be the glue that holds the military together in a certain way.
And don't get it wrong, like, trust me, like, it's almost like, it's like family. Okay. It's like the family deal. And you could really not get along with your siblings sometimes, but there is a certain point where if something's coming up against the family, like, watch out, I got my brother's back. Like, I got a little brother, and I used to kind of, do older brother stuff to him, right? Really give him a hard time. But I would never let anyone lay a finger on him around me. Don't you dare. That's my brother right there, right? So the teams it's like everywhere else. It's a dysfunctional family, but it's also a very tight family. Like, we come together when it really matters.
Yeah.
But some of the guys, man, you guys just cannot stand each other in the off time. But we all got each other's back going through the door.
Oh yeah, 100%. So let's talk about adversity for a little bit. So obviously you experienced that during Buds and Hell Week, but I've heard that that's not the most adverse situation that you face as a SEAL. So kind of walk me through, what did you learn about adversity?
I think, personally speaking, the most, like, difficult thing that I went through was that mentor of mine that I mentioned, Scott. He was like a second father to me, and he took an opportunity he put to go overseas again, just as I was signed up and getting ready to roll out and go off to boot camp and get the whole journey started. And he gets on the phone with me, and we're having this conversation on the phone. He's letting me know, he's like, all right, Junior, I'm about to go do this thing. He's referring to going off to Iraq. And he says, I just want you to know something, though, that I've never told anybody that I've ever trained before. He says, I know you're going to make it through SEAL training. And I still can't even describe, like, how much that meant to me to hear that from him, because we would have those conversations in the truck as we're, like, going to go do some mountain climbing. He'd always tell me, Junior, you never know who's going to make it. The guys you think will, they don't. The guys you don't think will make it, they will. And I always was waiting for him to kind of be like, but I know you will. And he wouldn't say it. And so, boom, for that to happen, like, right there in that phone conversation, that filled me up. And I just couldn't wait for my opportunity. I knew I was going to make it too, but to hear him say that he knew I was going to make it, like, oh man, I can't wait to prove my mentor right, make him proud. So he's reminding me of the timeline of things, how he's only going to be gone a couple months. And then after a couple months, he'll be back and I'll be done with boot camp. I'll start SEAL training. He says, I'm going to be there. We're going to see you make it through. And so, we say our goodbyes, get off the phone. And now Scott's gone off to, Iraq. And I'm just days away from going off to boot camp. I figure if I can't work out with my mentor in person, what's the next best thing? Well, I'll just, go over some of the programming that we've done together. I know the deal. So I'm up one day, I'm in my room, television on, and I can't believe what I see on TV, because what I see is a picture of Scott smiling. And I'm like, what's Scott doing on TV? He'd been on TV plenty of times before. He's an extraordinary Navy SEAL. Holds all kinds of records, world champion pentathlete, youngest man to ever make it through SEAL training, the only man to beat the beast on a TV program called Man vs. Beast, where he raced a chimpanzee through an obstacle course and pulled the head of that monkey on monkey bars. All right, so I'm just like, what is Scott doing on TV? And as I'm looking at this smiling picture of him, that's where I see in the lower third of the screen Scott's birth date, and then it has a dash, and it says March 31, 2004. And before I could process in my mind, like, the meaning of that, translate that right there, I didn't have that opportunity, because it switches from this smiling image of him to graphic video footage, a vehicle engulfed in flames, which turned out to be the vehicle that he was in. And then he, along with 3 other Americans, they were ambushed over in Fallujah, Iraq, and ripped out of these vehicles. And I'm looking at these scenes now where these bodies are in the streets, this angry Iraqi mob, they have sticks and rods, and they're beating and wailing away, trying to do everything they can to mutilate the bodies. And then they find rope and wrap it around their legs, hook them to vehicles, drag them through the streets of Fallujah, string them upside down from the Euphrates River Bridge, set their bodies on fire. And then they start chanting over and over in Arabic, Fallujah is the graveyard of Americans, Fallujah is the graveyard of Americans. And I think, pretty needless to say, like, I'll never have the words to describe, like, watching that on TV and just like all the emotions and feelings that come over you. It's one of those things that does transform you as a human being. And so we're talking about dealing with adversity. Well, part of our SEAL creed, it actually leads off with the words forged by adversity. We're forged by it. So these are the things that forge us or cause you to fail. You have a choice.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I think this is like sort of like the takeaway for everyone is like, we've all faced adversity. Whoever you are listening right now, you've made it to this point in your life, you've faced it. And here's the thing we have to come to grips with, is that we will face more. If you continue on, it's imminent. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Something bad is going to happen. In the workplace, bad news is going to happen within the family. Like, it's going to happen. It invades our life. We never get to custom choose it. It's just like a tsunami, a hurricane that comes through. So if you can't control the fact that you are going to face some nasty adversity coming up in the future at some point, I know I will face more. What's the one thing I can control? That's where we got to start looking. I can't control that, but I can control how I respond. That is the one thing that is in my power still. I am the determiner of whether or not this adversity will be, what we can call a wing or a weight. Will it be a weight that just I allow it to sink me, leave me knocked down, never to resurface again? People just look and say, wow, look at that guy. He's out for the count, never coming back from that one. Or do you find a wing in the moment, which is just really a way to rise to the occasion? And that's what you got to be looking for. And so it's case by case basis, because all the adversity is different out there, and the way where you find that wing is different. But here's what I know. Going into the future, whenever I do face more adversity, I don't know what it's going to be, but I know what I'm looking for in that moment. I'm trying to find the wing. I'm trying to find a little bit of elevation. I'm trying to find a way to be forged by this adversity. And so with what happened with Scott, just to kind of give you a circumstantial example, looking back, like when we lose somebody, one of the things that we do is we go back in our mind and, we think about, like, what was the last time I was with that person? What was the last thing I said to that person? It becomes that much more important, because that's it. Like, that's the last conversation you had. And as I was reflecting on that phone call with him, that's when I remembered his words, Junior, I know you're going to make it through SEAL training. It's like, boom, I grabbed onto that right there. Like, it became that much more important for me now to make it through. That was like the beginning of the forging process. I'm going to do this for so much more. I want to do this in honor and memory, of my mentor, and really press on his legacy. I wrote his name on the inside of my hat. I wanted to be the guy. Like I was trained by Scott Helbenston, and so with his name on the inside of my hat, going through SEAL training when times got difficult, that was one of those things I would literally look up at when it
Mm,
got tough, and I would just think, man, you'd have to kill me before I ever quit on the legacy of that guy's name right there.
yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Well, that kind of goes back to your why, right? That was probably one of your whys right there.
And what I'm happy about is like my why, like I said, not everyone's why is going to be the same. And some whys might seem really silly to other people. My why in the beginning was so immature. I'm glad that eventually it did evolve and become a better why. My why in the beginning was I thought it would be cool to be a Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
I thought that would be really something where people go, wow, look at what he's doing. That it would be flashy, a great identity.
Hmm.
And that why did mature along the ways. And one of the things it matured into is like, I got to do this for so much more than self.
Hmm.
It's bigger than that right there.
Yeah. Man, I think those are the knowing your why and adversity. Those are two lessons that are really important for, I think, dads to keep in mind too, as we go about our day to day. Why are you getting up and going to work every day? Why are you going to the gym? Why do you do what you do as a husband and a father? Right. And then
Hmm.
I think of adversity, man, I remember watching that news footage as it happened and being angry myself. I can't imagine having a personal connection to that, but I think adversity is a muscle that we can build. And I think it starts young. I think
Hmm.
that, you know, one example just happened this week with my son. He plays flag football and he got assigned, we rotate positions and he got assigned to a position that he doesn't like. And hopefully I'm not oversimplifying this, but I told him like, look, this is the position you're playing. It's out of my hands. I'm one of the coaches, but I don't handle that. So this is out of my hands. This is the position you're playing. You can either have a bad attitude about it, or you can rise to the occasion. You can make a choice. Are you gonna go out there and do the best you can at this position, or are you gonna have a bad attitude and potentially impact the way that your team performs during the game? So that's just one tiny little example of how, even in youth, we can teach them how to handle adversity. And I think, like I said, that's a muscle that develops over time. You can continually and intentionally work on that so that when you are faced with real, true adversity, that muscle reflex of, okay, I've got a choice, and just being aware of that moment, I think it becomes second nature to us. So,
It is a muscle. It's a chipping away, a chiseling process. And, if you know the Lord, God's at work, through all that as well. I'm going to take an attempt at sharing an anonymous quote. It's been a long time since I've shared it, so I don't know if I have it still, but it captures this, and at least I'll get at least most of it, if not all of it. But it goes to say, when God wants to drill a man and thrill a man and skill a man, when God wants to mold a man to play the noblest part, when he yearns with all his heart to create so great and bold a man that all the world shall be amazed, watch his methods and watch his ways, how he ruthlessly perfects whom he royally elects, how he hammers him and hurts him, and with mighty blows converts him into trial shapes of clay, which only God understands. While man's tortured heart is crying and he lifts beseeching hands, how God bends, but he never breaks when it's man's good he undertakes. And now he uses whom he chooses, and by every act induces him. Something else about fusing him, God knows what he is about. When it's and so
that is really good, man. And you
I
did
wish
great.
I remember that last part. When he uses whom he chooses, and by every act induces him, something fuses him. But God does. When God wants to use a man in a great way, he knows what he's about. Like I said, I took a shot at it, but 90% of it is there. That's what God does. He bends us, but he
Yeah.
doesn't break us.
Yeah.
And that chiseling process is not a comfortable feeling whatsoever. Um, but it's better to be used by God in that way, to be that sort of man in the arena that Theodore Roosevelt like talks about. It's better to take that shot, and maybe you fail, but at least you fail while daring greatly, so that your place will never be among the cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Like that is a person I never want to be. It's the person that just was a spectator the whole time. I'd rather
Yeah.
get in there and fail
Yeah.
than to not try at all.
Oh man, this is so good. You kind of got me fired up now, and you've got a fire in your eye too. You've got me pumped up. I feel like that might be a good spot to kind of wrap it up. Man, I don't know if we got to all of your talking points, but I feel like we might need to do this again if you're open to it.
1,000%, bro. We could totally do it again. I'd love it.
Awesome, man. Chad, thank you so much. Before we go, first of all, a question that I try to remember to ask all my guests, and I almost forgot to ask you. I know you've talked about legacy before and you touched on it in this episode. If you had to define what an inspired legacy meant to you, put you on the spot here. What does that mean to you? What's an inspired legacy to Chad Williams?
I would call it the things that you write on the inside of your hat. And what I mean by that is before we went into Hell Week, the instructors gave us white felt markers and they wanted us to write on the inside of the hat the things that were going to get us to dig deep when the going got tough. And I remember looking around the room at what other people were writing on the inside of their hats. I'm looking for inspiration. And looking around the room, what I saw was a common theme, a common thread between the guys that made it and the guys that didn't. The guys that didn't make it were the ones that were writing very narcissistic things on the inside of their hat, right? The ones that did make it, here's the common theme. And I still have this hat to this day. And this is exactly what's on the inside of my hat. It's faith, family, friends. So I guess you could say that's what the inspired legacy is. It's in faith, family, friends. Obviously, that relationship with God. If you have no peace with your creator, you'll have no peace here on earth. He is the one that is the mover, right? Like we talked about, that loyal heart. He's able to show himself strong. Family. On the inside of my hat, when I thought about quitting sometimes, and I never like really play with the idea of quitting, it's more like when things got really difficult, I would think of this, how awful it would be and how I will never have that phone conversation with my parents, letting them know in the middle of the week when they shouldn't be hearing from me in a week, hey, I quit. They're not going to hear those words. I'd rather die than have that conversation right there. And then my friend, Scott Helvenston, I had his name written the inside of my hat. And so in the SEAL Creed, this is what it says. It says, in the worst of conditions, I'll rely upon the legacy of those who have gone before me to steady my resolve and guide my every deed. When I think about my mentor, Scott Helvenston, or I think about other SEALs like Mike Monsoor that jumped on a hand grenade to save the lives of others, laying down his life, that fires me up. That legacy steadies my resolve and guides my every deed. And so we could look at the legacy of those that have gone before us to steady our resolve, but also we should be trying to lay down a legacy similar to theirs as well. So to me, that's what the inspired legacy is.
Man, it's tough to top that one. That's good stuff. Chad, where can people find you and follow you online so they can keep track of what you're up to?
Social media, I'm probably most active on Instagram. It's the same title of the book, Seal of God. And online, you can find me at sealofchrist.com. I tried to get the Seal of God, but some guy already bought it.
All right, man. We'll link to all that in the show notes. Chad, again, really appreciate your time, man.
Thank you for having me on, Mark. I appreciate it.